I'm Elga Gemst, and we're in downtown Moretown, in the Black Dog District. Yeah. And this is a building that my husband and I bought about 35 years ago. We bought it because it had a vacant attic. It had apartments that were occupied that would pay the mortgage, and a vacant attic, which for an artist is a real draw. So we built a stairwell to access it out back, and it has been my studio for glass for over 30 years.
And you call your studio
Mad Women in the Attic. Because we're on the Mad River, and there are all kinds of stories about what they used to do with women when they weren't behaving. They'd stick them up in the attic, and it was just a catchy name, and I do work in an attic. So I have a showroom downstairs. These are finished products, and then upstairs is my studio. So come on. Sure, let's go. So
Elga is a glass artist, stained glass.
I started just with stained glass. Well, I started before that. I grew up in a family that had an art supply, picture framing, and gallery in Montreal. And I grew up working there and being very comfortable with glass and cutting glass. And so when I was about 19, I realized that I already had half of the skill set that was needed for doing stained glass. So I think I bought a book. We didn't have internet yet. I couldn't figure out how to do the work, but I gradually taught myself how to do it and put myself through college down in Portland, Maine.
What did you study?
I was an earth science major, but I really wanted to be an architect. And so when I finished college, I put away all my glass and went off to graduate school in Seattle and became an architect. And I came back and worked as an architect for a good while. But my husband and I each had full-time jobs, and we adopted a few kids, and we realized that it just wasn't a workable situation. And glass always was more satisfying to me, being my own boss, not working for a committee. So I just took over this space, and glass has always been there for me.
What year was that when you started?
Oh, geez, what's 30? When
you were 19.
50 years ago I started, but it was 30 years ago that I got this place. About that, yeah. Back when I was in college, I would go to a wholesaler in New Jersey, and they had a special kind of glass that I really loved called full antique glass, and it was made by a company in Germany called Lambert's. And I couldn't afford that glass. It was very expensive. But I would go through the bins and I would find the broken little corners, and I would buy those. And I said to myself that if I could ever afford to work with that glass, that I would. And then you fast forward about 25 years, and I realized that, in fact, I could. And so I booked myself on a tour in Germany for stained glass people. And we went to a bunch of installations and studios, and we ended up at the factory that makes my favorite glass. We landed there on my birthday, and it was very delightful. And I went through their bins, saw their whole process. This is a mouth-blown glass. So, for example, this is a sheet, a standard size that they make. And they blow it by hand. So it starts out as sand and other metal oxides, and then they come in the morning, and they get a large gather of this glass that's been melting all night long, and they're starting to blow it, and it's bigger and bigger and forming into a cylinder. And this guy's got a pole in there that's going to support it, because they've already sheared off one end. They're about to shear off the other end, so you end up with cylinders. And then they score the cylinder and put it on a moving belt that goes through another heating process, and you can watch it unfurl. So this is the sheet that you end up with, something like that. And the top and the bottom of the cylinder are rounded. You can see how they're not sharp.
Oh, right.
Because they were molten.
And this is where it was
But the top and bottom are sharp because it didn't remelt, it just relaxed. Now, they make regular colors, just straight colors, but I go for the stuff that is really one-of-a-kind mixtures and shapes, forms, colors.
Why are you drawn to this color?
You know, even in architecture, I was always more attracted to work that already had something there that I could respond to. Like, I prefer renovations and additions to starting out with just a plain site. So with glass, something in the sheet will speak to me and tell me that it inspires something in me, I guess. That's one way to say it. But I feel it more like a call and response kind of thing. So I'll cut out something that starts me on a piece. And I don't necessarily know where that piece is going. I don't know exactly what it's going to be or how big. And it grows, as opposed to drawing a cartoon and applying the colored pieces of glass like paint by number.
It might start with the painted spot instead of
right.
the narrative.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to give you an example, the one up there, I call that one Mud Season. And I think you can see which piece was the inspiration.
The river, the blue.
Well, the what I'm thinking of is the muddy road.
Oh, the muddy road.
The muddy road. And then I painted the fence line and put the little farm in there. And it grew into that. And then, for example, this one here that is spring runoff in the woods. It pretty obviously, I think, started with the pool of water in the middle. And everything kind of went from there. I would set pieces of glass near it and see what resonated with the piece. And it ultimately grew to that. So that's how I work with this glass. I used to only have more traditional straight colors, and I didn't work that way with that. But this glass just inspires me, and it keeps the creative juices going through more of the process instead of just at the beginning.
And do you feel like these sheets of glass from Germany, are they, it seems like they come to mimic the natural environment for you?
Oh yeah.
Like you found the Mad River
Absolutely.
in one sheet, and then you found
Yeah.
the Muddy Road in another.
Right.
Is that typical?
I respond to my environment that way when I'm driving around, and then I see something in the glass that triggers, memory, not of a specific place, but of the feeling that you have when you look at the Vermont landscape, for example.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of your works I can see they're inspired by the environments that
Right,
are around
yeah,
here.
yeah. And every time I cut into a piece of glass, I end up with lots of little pieces of glass, and I can't throw any of it away, especially the Lambert's glass. So I keep everything, and then I need to come up with ways to use that, or else I'd just be buried in little pieces of glass. So I have themes of things like these stars or angels, different things that I can make that are still one of a kind, but they're kind of they're small and they're affordable. People like them. People buy them.
Do you feel like you spend more time doing these big pieces or tinkering with all the little?
I'd like to spend more time on the big pieces, but it requires a big chunk of time. And I haven't had that lately, but I will. But it also depends on how creative I'm feeling. Sometimes I come in and I am not prepared to do a large work. Or I'm not feeling inspiration. So I have lots of kinds of work that I can do that are just like therapy. It's like get out of your head into your hands, and I'm just working, and it's good for me.
And what about these pieces that you're melting in the kiln? What does your state have to be, or how are you feeling when you're working in that mode as opposed to the stained glass?
Well, there's something about these striped pieces that is very. I keep saying the word therapeutic, but well, you know, they teach basket making in institutions for a reason. There's something calming about doing something with your hands repetitively, and so I do that with this kind of glass that I put together and fuse. I cut it into thin strips and set it in a mold vertically. And there's something about the way the colors work together that just feels good. It makes me happy, you know, some of the combinations. So I'm amazed at what you can do with just a batch of colors of strips of glass. It hasn't failed to keep me entertained. So it doesn't require a lot of creativity or inspiration. And I can do these, you know, all day long sometimes. And then after I make something flat, fuse it in my kiln, then I might put it in another mold that the piece slumps into and takes the shape. So this is a whole different kind of glass. And it's a completely different process than stained glass. But I also can incorporate fused glass in my stained glass work.
You'll combine them?
Right, like up here. The center of this piece is a fused piece.
And what is the glass set in? That looks like a tin.
Yeah, it's the cover of an old tin. I don't know, potato chips or something.
Popcorn,
Yeah,
like
right, yeah. So I have a plasma cutter and I cut into the metal and I insert the glass, and I find those two things very compatible, the metal and the glass. I started out by making these license plates of the Green Mountains. And
here it looks like you're painting on top of the glass.
right, yeah. So after I took up fusing glass, I took a course in painting on glass. And the painting is done with actual glass powder mixed with a medium, and then you fire it, and it becomes a part of the glass. It is glass, it's all glass. So you'll see I incorporated painting and stamping in this piece, and sometimes I'll paint little windows in my barns. But the thing is, you have to fire it before you put it together, so you have to think ahead more than I often do. So there's the stained glass, there's the fusing, and there's the painting. It feels as though there's no end to the possibilities with glass. So it's a great hobby, especially if you take it up early enough that you have time to explore those different tangents.
It seems like there's no end to the color combination possibilities.
Right.
Either.
But it's not like you can make your own colors. You have to have the glass.
Which we're going to go see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we film this?
Yeah.
Speaking of great color combinations.
And then there was lamp making, and there's just some samples of some shades that I was working on. I'll show some more of my lamp ideas upstairs.
I'm just going to grab my camera.
Yeah.
1 second.
I hope to have a large selection of hanging lamps by next year at this time. But with glass for me has been something that's always in the background. Life has taken me in all kinds of different directions, and it requires you to pay attention to whatever is emerging in your life. And sometimes I'm away from glass for years at a time, but it's always here, ready to remind me who I am and what I like to do.
It's interesting how there's something about glass and metal and the way you put things together that makes you want to touch everything, like even more so than painting. You often want to like feel the texture of painting, but these pieces particularly, you want to
Thank you.
touch
Yes.
it. Yeah.
This is a series that I have done that's called A Cross Section of a Rainy Day. So that's sort of my architecture coming in, cross section where you're cutting through structure and you're seeing what's inside. And this to me is when you go through the clouds in a plane and you see the blue sky and there's rain obviously and clouds coming down, and that it's it's a different perspective. This glass with what I think of as rain came out of a renovation of a bank in Burlington. It was the partition between workstations at a bank.
How did you get access to that?
I have a place that I buy glass up in Burlington, Larry Rebecki's, and he had a piece about a couple square feet, and this is the only thing I've used that glass for. This one is Isle of Yew, and it has a little sheep there. This was a bubble in a piece of blue glass, and I built an island into it. It's not very Vermonty, but I like the play on words. I call this one Ice Jam. To me, the forms inside, even though it's not, the colors aren't right, the forms inside this bubble are like the chunks of ice when they break up in the river. And of course, there's the Camel's Hump series. And if you want to see it from the other side, you just, from Burlington, it looks one way, and from Montpelier, it looks the other way. And you know how it makes its own weather up there. I'm lucky to have a sheet of glass that just had a few clouds in it, so I would design it around that.
What is the technique, this yellow sun that's hanging, that little...
This one?
What is the technique that's, it almost looks like there's a drawing.
Yeah, I painted, I drew the, I guess, sunflower seeds or something in there. Yeah, and then I have a friend, Michael Egan, who blows glass. He would let me get some cut-off pieces from his blown glass. For example, the center of this was maybe, and some of these areas here were from his blown glass. And I would, if it weren't flat, I would flatten them in my kiln and then use them in my glass work.
And is Michael local?
Yeah, he's in Granville.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is it easy to find glass in Moretown or here in the valley?
Do I find
Do you
it?
ever source glass?
Well, it would be something that someone might have at a flea market. If I can, it might be glass. It might be etched glass from an old window, and I would use that. Or it might be some other antique glass item. Sometimes I'll get something that someone's broken, that's some fancy piece of glass, like a bowl, and I could flatten that in the kiln and use it in my glass. And I could, if I can wrap copper foil around it, for example, this salt shaker, I can incorporate it into a piece. Shells, ornaments of different kinds, things you find at the beach, on the road. So, I guess I want to tell you about when we had Hurricane Irene, because I told you about going to Lambert's and selecting a series of sheets. So when they were ready to ship their next shipment to my wholesaler in New Jersey, they included my sheets, and I drove down to New Jersey to pick them up, and I brought them up here, and I took over this apartment unit, and I put glass, all my big glass sheets up on the wall in both of these rooms a week before Irene hit. And we had 4 feet of mud, sludge in this space, but I had 9 feet in my own house. So it went into the ceiling, almost onto the second floor. And it took about 2 years before I was able to start to work with the glass that I had waited my whole life to work with. The glass was fine, was covered in mud, and volunteers, flood volunteers, moved it and probably hosed it down and moved it out of the flood. And we had to rebuild. We had to gut the first floor of this building and rebuild. But my house was in much worse shape, and I didn't know for sure that I would be able to even do glass again because I was that devastated. But it waited for me, and I was very happy to start to do that again.
And it wasn't damaged?
It wasn't glass can handle anything. I mean, it's very rugged.
And so you took these photos at the factory in Germany. It says April 2011. So then Irene happened
in September, or the end of August,
right.
August 28th. So it took several months for them to ship it and for me to get down and pick it up and then set it up. Yeah.
Do you have a piece in the showroom here that is from some of the glass that was buried in the mud?
I'm pretty sure that this piece was one of them. I have sheets upstairs that were definitely part of that. Since then, I haven't gone back to Germany, but since then they've put their glass online, their special glass like this, for wholesale customers. So I can select sheets on the internet, and they'll send them to my New Jersey place called Bentheim's. But it's not as good as going there, obviously. And so you want to see where I work? Okay.
Please.
Well, this is one of I have 2 favorite pieces right now, and this is one of them.
How come?
I found it speaks to me. It's very ethereal. It's more like a dream. I think I called it, what did I call it? Dreamscape. With the fish going through, you don't know if that's underground or on the surface. I've got the foliage going on here. It just works for me. So you see, we built the stairwell and cut across. And we'll let the door close, and you can take a look at this piece in the door. That center is a rondelle, and before they figured out how to make flat glass, they would blow glass and spin it and they would make these flat little discs. And the pipe that it was attached to would have been attached here, and then they would spin it, and the centrifugal force would flatten it out. And then they'd make whole windows just with those rondelles attached together. You can find those in bars and pubs all over Europe. Here I have a sample set of the colors that Lambert's glass makes. These are just the straight colors, although they'll make custom colors too if you ask.
Did you make this piece, Elga?
I did not, but it was in a round barn show, and I needed it. So
interesting.
Yeah. Here are a couple of my kilns, and I have another kiln at home with some samples of some of the blown glass items that have been flattened. I could use this in a flat piece.
And you have something here in the kiln that you're working on?
Yeah, I do a lot of experiments because I don't really know how to do this stuff. So this was just strips of glass overlapping, and I fused it together flat, and then I put it in a shaped mold and fired it again to a lower temperature, and it takes on that form. Not that I really think this is great, but it's an interesting idea, and it could point me in the direction of something that I might really like. So this is my happy place right here. And I'm surrounded with my antique glass, and I have drawers and drawers of little pieces of antique glass here, and all kinds of things that I may or may not use in the future. To embed in pieces. So you really don't need very many tools to do stained glass, but you do need to have an inventory of glass. Mm-hmm. So I just use a simple glass cutter. For half of my glass career, I didn't even have a grinder. I just used a file. I use the copper foil technique, which is very forgiving. Things don't have to fit as perfectly. But now I had a student once that left me a grinder. I guess she figured I needed a grinder. So I have a glass grinder, and I have a few other nice power tools. Maybe I can.
The grinder is to cut it?
The grind, not for cutting, it's for shaping or for smoothing the edges.
Okay.
It's diamond. It basically diamond bits on a bit, and this is a diamond bandsaw. And both of those, including this one also, which is a lap grinder, you need water to be circulating to cool the glass and the cutting edge while you're working.
Do you mostly cut by hand?
I do. I cut freehand by hand. Basically, that's what I do.
And how do you actually cut with this tool?
So cutting glass is it's like I tell people that it's like a Hershey bar that comes with the little scores on it, so you break it at the score line because it's weaker there. So I'll give you an example. I would just take the cutter, I would make a scratch, basically, and then I would snap it. Yes, I would. I took a piece of, this isn't good. We're going to have to edit that piece. This is a tempered piece of glass. I'm sorry, I don't know what's that doing. Tempered means it was heated and cooled in a certain way that it couldn't be cut. Okay, we take two. You want to make it have that, sing. You want to hear the cut, and then you want to snap it. So it's just like a chocolate bar, right?
How often is it breaking?
You mean breaking where I don't want it to break? Maybe 10% of the time. Or less. Depends. You know, the handmade glass that's irregular in thickness and has a lot of bubbles, that could break more commonly. Or if you have something underneath that you didn't realize, it could cause it to break. But mostly, it behaves.
And so this is all one type of glass.
It's mostly antique glass. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite glass here. And this is, like I said, this is where most of my pieces that I consider successful start here with some of this glass. But I have all kinds of other glass. The glass that I used to always use, you know, a lot of it is American glass. Some of it now is made in Mexico. I have assortments of every kind of glass and out there, pretty much.
And it's all organized by color?
By color and by type. And then I often cut strips. I do borders. I like to use selection, maybe antique glass or etched glass, or glass that I've stamped and fired. Hard to see that, but you can see I have, there, maybe that. I've stamped these and fired them with glass paint. And then they're there, ready for me to work on. Here's a setup on a light table. For example, I have this piece right here that is the beginning of a small panel. It's the horizon. I mean, that's what it's telling me it needs to be. And I don't know what else is going to be in this panel. I mean, I've got this little piece with some fish. I've got some trees. But I'm not in any hurry. It'll kind of develop over time. Just like I have many, many pieces that are just gorgeous sections. And I'm not sure what that is, but that's a piece that's going to start a larger project. And I have these pieces waiting to help me, let me know what they want to be. Like, I don't know that if this is going to go with that, but this is the beginning piece. And then there's the sky and background, distant hills there.
What is the lamb?
The lamb is a piece of painted glass that I got, I think maybe on eBay or on Etsy. I'm not sure. I sometimes find things on either site. It's a painted piece. It's before I started and learned how to paint on glass myself, but it's using techniques that are beyond me. Yeah, and I think it's going to be in an upcoming piece. I just don't know. It's pretty large, so I'm not quite sure how it's all going to fit. Here's a lampshade that is the only piece that I have left from the time that I put myself through college back in my 20s. But I still have a lot of glass from those days. I just don't have any finished pieces.
What would you say is your oldest glass in the studio? Is it possible?
You mean the glass that I've had the longest? Well, anything from back then it would qualify. This was definitely this glass. I remember ordering from Oregon, but I was probably 22 or 23. I have really old glass, but I haven't had it myself that long. But glass doesn't deteriorate very much. You know, of course it's fragile, but.
Can I ask you a question over here?
Yep.
So all these little things, these little jars, and
Yep.
see all these salt and pepper shakers. Are these all things that you would cut and melt down?
I might cut them and melt down, but more I would use them. Here's one I've already wrapped copper foil around it, so that's where it would be integrated into a flat panel.
As a 3D element.
Right, yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do with all of these, but they're here if I ever need them.
Are these glass?
No, those are
iron?
like iron, yeah. And I have a lot of things that have the potential of being parts of lamp bases. I did a lot of lamps earlier, but they were mostly with standard size lamp bases, and so I could repeat the form of the shade because I already had it worked out. But what I'm left with now are a lot of lamp bases that are one of a kind, and they would require a unique design for each one, and a unique form to build the shade on, and that's extremely labor intensive. So they would have to be ones that I just do out of love, because you can't get your money back for your time for something that takes that much time. But I could see doing that if I have the time, do that for a few years. Let me show you my lamp room. I had to take over a bedroom from a downstairs apartment in order to have space for my lamp material. So, yeah, I pretty much used up all my standard lamp bases, and so now I'm left with unique things that I've picked up at flea markets. I used to go to Brimfield on a regular basis, and I would find all kinds of things that were just very inspiring and that I could see using with my glass. But I think I have more than I could do in a couple of lifetimes. So
where does one find this big blue light bulb?
I don't remember where I found that. But I am fascinated by different sources of light. I really like LEDs now because they can come so small, and they can have some beautiful forms in their filaments. Yeah, so
I've noticed a lot of fish.
yeah, I just sold I made a fish bowl, and I included one of these ornamental fish, the three-dimensional fish in there, and some real shells that were transparent enough, translucent enough that they let light through. And then I made this. This is the first piece that I made when I got this studio, and it's just called Happy Fish in its own little pond. And it was just expressing my happiness.
So what kind of mood do you have to be in to step in here and start working on lamps?
On lamps?
Yeah. What is that?
I would have to know that I had time ahead of me. I would have to know that I had a week or some period amount of time, because this isn't something you just jump into and do an hour of. So I guess what I would have to do, I'd have to feel adventurous, and I'd have to look around and see which base inspired me the most, and I would start working with that base. and maybe I would make some cardboard models of shades of different heights and shapes to try to understand what shape was needed and what size was needed for that particular base. And you know, when you solder, the metal turns to liquid and it runs downhill. So you have to be able to always arrange the lampshade in such a way that you can always be working on a horizontal surface. And that's tricky with shades. And so you have to have a support that will hold the pieces without crushing or falling off. So it's kind of you sort of have to make it up as you go and figure it out. But it can get pretty frustrating.
Is it ever frustrating to not have time?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. It's very often. That's my biggest frustration.
Integrating life.
But life, you know, you have priorities. And, you know, as much as I love this, it's a treat and it's a privilege, but it's not the most important thing in the world. So. So I want to tell you about fusing, or show you about fusing. And I had never done fusing when I was younger. So I took a class in fusing and bought a kiln. And I found it's fairly technical in some ways. There's only certain kinds of glass that you can melt with other glass. I guess what I want to say is they have to have the same chemistry so that they expand and contract at the same rate when they are going through the melting process and the cooling off process. If you use different kinds of glass that behaves differently, you'll set up tension inside the glass and the glass won't be stable. So it might explode in the kiln, or it would just fall apart on you after firing. So they've got a system for this. They talk about the coefficient of expansion and they give it a number. So this glass in this corner is all COE 96. And I can melt any of this glass with any of the other colors. And then I have a section over here that's COE 90. And I can melt that with itself, but I can't interchange them, and I can't use any glass from any of the other areas in my studio unless I test everything. And I don't have time to test everything, so I stick to these rules, and things don't cross over. But I really liked the colors of the opaque glass. This is made in Mexico. So I would get a sheet 2 feet by 2 feet, and I would cut it up into strips, and I would assemble them. Here I have, you know, large, long strips, and when I get them organized in a way that is pleasing to me, I would put them in a ceramic dam that holds them in place, and I would fuse them, and then I'd end up with a large platter or a small coaster, as you saw downstairs. And it's just a fun thing to do. And also, if I'm trying to sell things, which I do, they're very sellable. You know, they're a price that people can afford, and they're just a little happy thing. So one day I cleaned off my table that was covered in scrap, and I put it all in a form, a ceramic form, and melted it. And I ended up with this, which could be a cheese platter, or I could drill a hole and make it a clock face. But I also really like the way it looks right like that, like a little side table. And it just points out the possibilities. There's so many possibilities. I just wish I had more time. That's.
Yeah, I love this piece.
Yeah, this one.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see I wasn't selective in what I threw in this tray, but I could be more selective and there wouldn't be as many little surface flaws. But, you know, it's a handmade piece, so what do you expect? And then I have this logo that I made. This is Mad Women in the Attic. It's my logo. And as you can see, I'm up in the attic and I'm working. I've got, you know, smoke coming out of the chimney. And I thought I was, you know, planted in the lawn and this was a shadow. But in fact, after I made it, I saw there was a loon there. And then in fact, maybe I'm floating down the river. Or maybe I'm on a rock in the river that's going by. I'm not sure. I like things that can be interpreted different ways. Obviously, I don't do very many abstracts, so I obviously do realism in a way, but it's usually a little bit wonky. You know, I don't try to reinterpret the world exactly. Mm-hmm. We already have the world. So.
Can we film some of these? Elga, do you mind if I pull?
Feel free.
Show some of these smaller.
What do you use these for? What do you use?
Well, sometimes I come up with an idea for something, and I start just pre-cutting or selecting the little bits and pieces that I think I could use when I'm in the mood for doing that particular thing. There's a bunch of rondelles.
Mm-hmm.
I had.
And these are stamped, right? Or
Yeah,
these are
yeah.
painted? Oh, look at these faces. Did you paint these faces?
Yeah.
That's great.
What do I have? There's so many possibilities, but you know, when I've done these little trees. I guess there's one over there. I'll put a wire that would end up being held up on a piece of wood, and in this case the wire broke off, but I can still use this as a little tree in one of my works. Here's a steeple waiting for a church, and here's some little farm buildings. When I find the right piece of glass for a very specific purpose, I try to set it aside, make sure I can find it when I need it.
Are there any more unconventional techniques that you're using when you're working with glass?
I think that cutting in the metal and using glass as an infill I haven't seen that anywhere else. I think it has a lot of potential. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, using the fused pieces in with stained glass is, I haven't seen that very much. This was it used to be, I think it came from the state surplus barn. This was a shelf, a metal shelf for like shelving in a state building. And then I just cut it out, and I could then put glass in any of those openings.
How do you cut metal when you're doing that?
I have a plasma cutter, and it, especially on a stormy day, it's great. I have my goggles on, and I've got this plasma cutter, and I'm cutting metal, and there's sparks flying everywhere. It's a lot of fun, but you have to be in a certain mood for that. So sometimes I am.
And what would a typical day in your studio be? My typical day would be that I have a few projects already going,
and I come in to try to figure out where they're going next. I might put in a book on tape and listen to take care of my monkey brain.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Both, either one. Okay. And then let my eyes and my hands kind of do the work. And that would just be a wonderful day. But I really need to have a chunk of time. I need days. I need to know that I can, if I get into I guess they call it flow. If I get into that, I don't want to be stopped. So it's better for me not to get into it until I know I have time to let it run its course. It's an emotional kind of a thing, the way I work. I'm not working to put food on the table, you know. I do sell my work, but I don't rely on the income from that. It more just helps me feel good about keeping going. And I like to know that other people appreciate the work. That's more satisfying than whatever amount of money I might make. But it's an emotional kind of thing. The expression. Is
processing part of it? Emotional processing, or can you say more about the emotional piece? Is it about?
It's kind of. I'm not religious, but it's kind of worship. I worship the landscape, and I see aspects of a beautiful landscape in the glass. And glass is an ancient natural material, and it's a way of being grateful and expressing that. I don't know what else to say, but yeah. Well, what else can I tell you? I can buy glass as frit, as powder, or big chunks of glass, and I can add that and use that in the fusing process.
Will you tell us a little bit more about, earlier you were describing how certain parts of glass or a color or something will call out to you, and then there's this iterative process, right? Of like listening, like hearing it speak and listening. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or maybe there's a piece in your studio that you could show us?
Sure.
Spoke loudly to you?
I have pieces that speak to me loudly. They're yelling at me all the time. Whenever I look at them, well, I've already shown you some of the ones that I have going, but I have pieces that are cut of special sections of glass that are meant to be just like that, but I don't know what else goes with them. You know, I mean, just beautiful, flowy things, but I'm not sure where it's going to go. So I can't work on all of them, obviously, at the same time, but I might have several going, and I might feel inspired by something I'm looking at somewhere else and bring it over and set it near it and other pieces, and I start getting a sense of what tone, how dark pieces, does this want to be surrounded with dark pieces or light pieces, with more color or less color, you know, and I just keep experimenting both on a light table and just on a white surface, until I start feeling comfortable with something, and then I may cut it into the shape that it wants to be or might want to be.
Sounds like a very intuitive.
It is, process. Yeah. It's not thinking. It's just it's a dance. It's like a dance.
And then it sounds like you're in relationship with all of these pieces of glass,
right,
in the process.
Yeah, yeah. And most of the glass, I know exactly where I got it, and you know, it feels it feels personal to me. And I'm never going to be able to use it all.
That's a great one.
Yeah, there's some really wonderful. I guess I have mostly just certain colors in this section.
And are these the German slabs? This is the German glass?
This is mostly the German glass. This is not. But sometimes you find some factory-made glass. This is just very standard thickness. It's made in a factory, and it's very uniform. And they could have a lot of wonderful swirls and patterns in it as well. But you don't want to end up with a piece that has too much going on. So it often ends up that I have one or two pieces in a work that have this amount of personality, and then the others are just supporting actors. It's like you wouldn't wear stripes and checks and a bow, and you want to
balance.
Yeah.
Fish.
Yeah, so these things were cut out to put inside of layers of glass and fusing, and the metal changes in the process of heating, and it also reacts with the glass, whatever the chemicals are in the glass. And this again is like I'm a kid in a kindergarten class, and I'm just playing because I don't really know what's going to happen or how to repeat what I just did. So there's really an experimental aspect to this. So I should say that glass, when it melts, it wants to be 1/4 of an inch thick. So it's like water. If you poured water on a table, it would reach a certain thickness and it would stop flowing unless it's on a slope. It has its own thickness it wants to be. So glass wants to be 1/4 of an inch. And so if you want to make something that's thicker than 1/4 of an inch, you have to hold it in to keep it from spreading and reaching the 1/4 inch thickness. And if you put it in thinner than 1/4 of an inch, it will pull up like into a ball. For example, if you put in a little square like this, it will end up being a little round piece that approaches 1/4 of an inch thick. So that's a good thing to know when you're working with glass.
Have you made your own beads?
Oh yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, but not beads for jewelry, but I use these for eyes. Some days it's an eyeball day. That's when I'm not feeling really creative, but I want to be productive. I might assemble a whole bunch of tiny little bits of glass, like maybe pile 2 or 3 things on top of each other, just little squares, little shapes, and put them in the kiln. And they will round up to what I use little eyeballs for creatures, bugs or whatever, birds. So those are eyeball days.
Wow.
You ever have an eyeball day?
Oh, yeah.
What about this piece? This might be my favorite one.
I came across this type of glass, and it hardly even seems like it's glass. It's extremely thin. It actually will, it has a coefficient of expansion 90, so it's compatible with the glass that I have, and I can melt it on top of some of that glass. And it's opaque, more or less.
This is the same
Yeah.
style, right?
And I found this at a glass place that I do business with in Lansing, Michigan. And I bought some of it, and as soon as I wanted to buy more, they said the company is no longer making it. And I was very disappointed, but I do have maybe 30 or 40 sheets. And I am waiting for the time that I can play with that and see what I can make out of it. There's gold and copper. This is a gorgeous one here. Isn't that something? I mean, a lot of the stuff, the raw material I work with is already, they're works of art already. Sometimes it seems sacrilegious to cut into them. that's what I
if
do.
they call out to you to do it,
That's what
you
I
must
do.
it.
Right. Yeah.
Have you had, are there particular teachers, or I guess I'm curious about some of the like bigger things that inspire you. Have you had certain teachers, or are you inspired by certain artistic movements? What have been some of the things throughout your career that have kind of like, you know, we talked about the environment shaping your work,
Right.
and life shaping your work. Have there been like more professional kind of elements that have shaped your work?
I have to think about that. The one that comes to mind is the woman that teaches the glass painting down in southern Vermont, Deb Combs. She is an artist. She paints on glass and teaches wonderful workshops. So she inspired me greatly when I went down for a workshop with her. I like things that aren't predictable. That I like work that isn't following everybody else. That's why I shy away from the what's traditionally known as stained glass, where things are symmetrical and very expected. I like things that are edgy or spontaneous. I guess that's what I get. The way that I work with this glass is more spontaneous and immediate, instead of something that is static. After the cartoon's been drawn, there's very little creativity or spontaneity in stained glass, and so I try to work in a way that keeps some of that through much of the process.
And you're mostly self-taught.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it kind of goes with the spontaneity. It seems.
Right. I don't follow the art world very much. I'd rather just be in my studio playing. I know that people's brains are all different, and some people really are inspired that by following other people and taking off from there, which is fantastic. But for me, I just want to be getting my hands dirty and making something. That's just what I want to do.
Do you like working in isolation?
I do. I do, yeah. But sometimes when I get into a group of people that have similar passion about glass, for example, then that's really refreshing. I mean, I miss the times when I worked in an architectural office and you have your colleagues and you're all working, possibly on the same project. I mean, there's something really wonderful about the camaraderie, and I don't have that with this. But on occasion, when I get together with someone else who does this kind of work or something similar, it's great because we have a lot in common.
And it seems like earlier you were telling me about the adult play group.
Oh, yeah.
So it seems like you've been able to find community around, maybe not this kind of glass art, but making in general in Moretown. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd like to do that more. I'd like to have my life be a little more predictable with I want to have a chance to join the watercolor group that's meeting, or offer it myself, or I had a play group for grown-ups that met once a week, and we would do different kinds of creative work every Tuesday night. And I love that, and I could see wanting to do that. I'd like to get, I'd like it to be a Moretown kind of thing. I'd love to set up an art cupboard at the town hall and have other people lead some workshops. That would be great. I don't know that it'll happen, but I still have hope for that.
Do you find Moretown to be an artistic or creative place and
There's
community?
plenty of people, but mostly they stick to themselves, or maybe I've just had my head in the sand. I've been so busy with my own life that I haven't, I'm always surprised and amazed, at who comes to the open studios that end up, living right here in Vermont or in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
I have wonderful people that come to open studio. I meet more creative types that way than any other way right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people come as a regular thing, like from out of state. They come every year, and I'd like to, have those people move right here next door. Yeah.
Yeah, people keep to themselves a lot.
Yeah.
Here.
And we respect each other's privacy, which probably also gets in our way,
What do you
because
mean?
because then we don't invite them over to have a hot dog and whatever and a beer. We respect their private time. It's a balance, and it changes over the course of a life how much you want to be out there with your community and how much you want to hide. Like I come up to this space and it's like a little private tree house, and people are reluctant to come up the stairs to visit me because they know that I might not be as welcoming, because I'm in the middle of something, and and I think other people have that too, so I'm reluctant to drop in on them. But when the flood happened, that was one thing that brought the community together, and it was so beautiful.
Irene or
Irene
year?
mostly. But even last year we flooded. We didn't have inches or feet in the house, but we had mud and silt that seeped in along the floor, and had just put down some oriental rugs that got destroyed, and people showed up to help clean. So it's pretty awesome.
Do you feel like the flooding makes its way into your work? I know you showed us pieces where the river is really prominent.
Right.
What about the flooding more specifically, and just the chaos around that?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think about, I've come to a kind of a piece about the river that it's like we have an agreement with the river. I get to live where I live right next to the river 99.9% of the time, and the river gets to live where I live that extra percent. And I accept it. I just have to choose to live a little differently if I don't want to sustain as much loss. I think it points me to live much more simply.
And you mean the river gets to live in your house?
Yes. The river gets to occupy that spot
Right.
a certain amount of the time, and maybe, more and more.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make me want to move. Yeah.
Well, you have this space. So how could
Right,
you
I
leave
have this
space.
space. Yeah. Well, I don't think we're going to actually wash down the river,
Yeah.
so I'm sort of counting on that.
Right. I'm just gonna glance at my questions and see if there's any
Yep.
lingering.
So people come for open studio and they have studio envy. And I can relate to that. I love to see how other people work. And they design their space around how they work. And so each space is unique.
Do you get out to other studios?
Well,
during
that's the
open studio?
problem with open
Interesting.
studio, because I don't ever get to go out. But I won't be doing that forever. So
Have you had apprentices?
I have, and I've taught classes as well. But because time is such a in such short supply, it feels like. I don't do that very much right now, but there's seasons for things, and I could see doing some small classes. I can accommodate about 4 people to do a class in fusing or painting or stained glass. I just don't have the time right now, and yeah, I said earlier that I grew up in a picture framing, art supply, and gallery in Montreal, a family business, and I just in the last year I've inherited it all, and I'm trying to liquidate it, and it's taking, I'm in 2 different countries, 2 different languages, 2 different sets of legalese, and it's been an overwhelming year. Well, the business used to be on Sherbrooke Street, but now it's off the DeCarry Expressway. So what else you got?
I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is sort of, I guess I have some future-oriented questions. I'm curious if there's like a dream project you haven't tackled yet, or how do you envision, are there techniques you'd like to try that you haven't experimented with? How do you imagine your practice evolving in the next few years?
Well, I think about how I'm going to tie things up and move things out, that I hope to be able to do it in a way where I have some say about it, as opposed to ending up leaving all of this for someone else to figure out how to send it out into the world, all my raw material. As I said, I want to do lamps. I love light and lighting, and I hope that I can use up a lot of my inventory of glass by making shades, lamp shades, and I hope to do that, and in the process discover new forms and new shapes, and to appreciate my glass.
Do you have a dream location where you would want to go and source some glass from?
Oh, I'm trying to hold myself back from buying any more glass or any more material. I have to hold myself back from going to Brimfield, because I get a lot of inspiration from things I see there and materials that I bring back from there.
That's the flea market in Western Massachusetts.
It's in southern. It's on the Connecticut border, about in the middle of the state, I think. And it runs for a week, 3 times a year, and I think it's 40 acres. And 20 different promoters have fields there, and you couldn't walk by everything in the week.
40 acres. Wow.
And there's nothing you couldn't find there. And I love to see the different kinds of people. And also lots of works of art, and lots of raw materials. Really, there's a lot. I see the world as a bunch of raw material, really, and I could make something out of anything. I feel like I can make something out of nothing. It sometimes feels like, and I have more ideas than I can ever fulfill. It would be nice to have a crew of people behind me to just follow through on some of them. But that's the predicament maybe a lot of us are in.
What material do you think you would be working in if glass didn't exist?
Oh, if glass. I think I would have enjoyed any art medium. And if I'd focused on one, I'm pretty sure I could have become quite competent in it, but none of them have the possibility as much as glass does to me. And glass changes with the lighting conditions, with the time of day. It's always new. You know, you put something in the window and you're seeing it in, you know, 1,000 different lighting conditions, and it's different every time. And you know, there's just so many directions to go with glass. So if I took up pastels or watercolors, there are lots of directions to go with those, but to me the breadth isn't anywhere near as wide.
Is there something about how glass feels in your hands? You know, all these
Yeah,
different materials.
I mean, it's real. It's real. It has weight. Yeah, I like things that are really tangible. Don't think I could ever do art on the, you know, on the internet. It's not real enough. I can't put my hands around it. And,
digital
right.
work, yeah. When you were in your family's frame shop in Montreal and you were, you know, applying glass and cutting, how did you said that's when you realized you loved glass, right?
I was comfortable with glass.
Comfortable with glass. What was that, the transition process from that kind of working with glass to
stained glass?
This is so different, right?
Right.
Those are kind of like different glass practices. How
Right.
did you,
Well,
was there like the first stained glass piece you made, and then was there a moment? Yeah.
well, I used many different art materials because I was exposed to them all and I had access to them all as a young person. But I didn't have access to colored glass, but I was comfortable with glass. I knew that was, it's a kind of an somewhat unusual skill to have to start with, and I figured, okay, so I have a little leg up in this direction, and why don't I just explore that a little bit? So that's what I did. I love color. I don't know what, I guess I lost the rest of your question.
Yeah.
As far as, I have a dream to draw. So I still have it in me to really just want to spend a month drawing. I'd love to. I've traveled a lot. I don't have an urge to travel, but the one thing I would travel for would be a week with a small group of people who were going to set themselves the task of drawing every day, basically all day long.
The drawing retreat.
Yes, somewhere, anywhere.
Residency or something.
Right. I would love that because drawing is at the base of all of the arts, all of the visual arts. And I love to draw. So, and I guess that obviously that ties in with stained glass. You have to be able to draw. I mean, people say I can't draw a straight line. Well, it's not about straight lines. We know how to draw straight lines. So it's more about do you feel as though you're expressing something in the lines that you create, and is there something about that feels good?
Yeah, it does. I'm looking at your piece over here on the window. It's almost like you're drawing with glass.
Exactly. Yes.
The line work is there.
Right.
The scene gets set up, so there is a kind of like drawing with the mind and putting the pieces of glass together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's all. It is.
Lines that kind of separate. Is that the copper tape that
The lines
that you separate the window, for example, or the smoke?
Yes.
That gives it a real.
Yeah.
look of being
It's drawing. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's the line work. So it does. Drawing is a big part of any of the visual arts. It's like the basic foundation. Yeah, I would like to do that. Thanks for asking that one.
Yeah.